Maryland vs Michigan. When you look at the stats, Maryland should have lost to SMU on Saturday night. They gave up 369 passing yards and 151 rushing yards to go with a ridiculous 15 penalties for 141 yards. The penalties ranged from false starts to offensive holding, pass interference, and unsportsmanlike conduct. Several players were flagged for multiple penalties. They currently rank tied for 126th with 10.3 penalties per game. Maryland should be able to move the ball at times against Michigan, but the defense is the biggest concern. They are allowing 392 yards per game, 89th, and they face Charlotte and Buffalo in their first two games. They are also giving up 274 yards per game in the air to rank 108th in the nation. If they continue to struggle on the back end and commit multiple penalties, they will be in big trouble on Saturday. Jim Harbaugh probably wants to see another blowout, but it probably wouldn't hurt to see his team go through a little adversity. They haven't had much when destroying Colorado State, Hawaii and UConn by a combined 166-17 in their first three games. Last week, they crushed the UConn Huskies thanks to J.J. McCarthy's 214 yards passing and 5 rushing touchdowns from Blake Corum. The sophomore is 30 of 34 for 473 yards and 3 TDs. He wasn't the definitive starter early on as Cade McNamara had the edge due to experience. But McCarthy has taken the job and has run with it. Corum, 5'8", 205, rushed for 952 yards and 11 TDs last season, and that's with a high ankle sprain that hampered him late last season. He now has 235 yards and 7 TDs in 3 blowout games, where the starters were removed well before the final horn. Jump on this line before it goes up. This is going to be an absolute blowout. Maryland has had just one road game, and it was Charlotte. The last time they traveled to Ann Arbor in 2019, they were crushed 38-7. Every game in this series has been a blowout since 2015, as the Wolverines have covered 6 straight. The Terps' penchant for committing penalties and their struggles in the secondary will force them to play a lot of zone. Michigan will be able to set up the run by passing the ball, and then Corum will take over with a big day running the football. The Wolverines' offensive line will just wear Maryland's defense down. Our team pick is Michigan minus 17 points. Maryland was supremely sloppy in last weekend's game against SMU. The team was penalized 15 times for 141 yards, an ungodly number of penalty yards for a team that already has a difficult time staying on the field. On top of the penalty yards, Maryland allowed SMU to run for 151 yards to go with 369 yards through the air. It's actually a testament to Maryland's improved talent from last season that they're undefeated entering the Michigan game. It's easy to ride the high of top 5 rankings and national recognition when you're feeling out your roster during the non-conference season. It's a much different story when you enter conference play with every team, even for the only time all year. Michigan has dominated everyone in its path so far this season, and with expectations being a playoff spot and a national title run, the Wolverines have their work cut out for them. Sophomore quarterback J.J. McCarthy has been clinical ever since snagging the starting job, throwing for 473 yards and 3 touchdowns on 30-34 completed passes for the season. For such a new quarterback, it's often difficult to know what to expect when facing big physical defenses, such as those in the Big Ten. It helps that he has RB Blake Corum to offer much-needed support. Last year, he rushed for 952 yards and 11 scores. Last game, Corum exploded for 5 rushing touchdowns. Michigan's running game has been spectacular this season. They have averaged 231.3 yards per contest and overall are at roughly 500 yards per game of total offense. Michigan should feast on a Maryland defense that has struggled against even inferior teams. Maryland's offense is more polished than any team Michigan has faced, and this could be a high-scoring blowout in which starters are still playing late into the third quarter. Our total pick is over 64.5 points. TCU vs SMU. This one is going to be a dandy as Dykes gets a shot at facing his former team. Duggan was dynamic after stepping in for the injured Morris in the opener, and then followed that up with a solid showing against Tarleton. The Horned Frogs are going to have to find a way to slow down SMU's offensive attack, but if there is anyone that is familiar with the Mustang system, it's Dykes. On the flip side, SMU is at home for this game, which works in their favor. The Mustangs have been extremely effective at moving the ball. If they can avoid the turnovers that bit them against Maryland, they have a very good shot here. As it stands, give SMU the slight advantage in this contest due to the continuity factor. Our team pick is Mustangs, plus 2.5 points. One last non-conference game for the Horned Frogs before a brutal, unforgiving 9-week Big She run to end the season. The first 2 wins of the Sonny Dykes era have come impressively, sitting first in the Big She for total offense with 521.5 yards per game and scoring more points in 2 games, 97, than Kansas State has in 3 games, 84. They rolled Pac-12 doormat Colorado in Week 1 by dominating on the ground to the tune of 275 rushing yards. TCU is running back by committee, but the lead back in both games has been Kender Miller with a combined stat line of 21 attempts, 108 yards, and 2 TDs. The defense has been better, allowing 15.0 PPG, with Tarleton State scoring a touchdown against TCU's mix of second and third team defense. SMU is pissed off. Dykes brought the Mustangs back to the top 25 and, more importantly, brought respect back to Southern Methodist football. The departure was ugly, but what people resented most was that he went to TCU. The long-standing rivalry of the Iron Skillet goes back 100 games. The Mustangs were a dreadful 0-5 since Big Brother joined the Power 5, but in 4 meetings from 2017 to 2021, Sonny Dykes was 2-2 with SMU against these frogs. What used to be a dislike for the neighbors might have developed into Texas-Oklahoma level hate. Nevertheless, SMU will examine ways to score, leading the AUK in PPG last year under Dykes. New coach Rhett Lashley and AUK Casey Woods have led SMU to 40.0 PPG at the start of their tenure with the help of veteran QB Tanner Mordecai's play that has birthed a 2-1 start. The over has hit 9 times in the last 13 meetings, with the 12th ranked defense for SMU and the 9th ranked defense for TCU, leaving little for defensive-based faith. SMU sports the 74th defense in the country in their 3 games, but has lent itself to the mercy of the over, which has been 33-29-1 during Sonny Dykes' tenure, and the residue of Dykes' fingerprints are still all over the SMU program, with a lethal air raid. Our total pick is over 70.5 points. Missouri vs Auburn. The Missouri Tigers comes into this game 2-1, sandwiching 2 home wins against lesser opponents around a blowout loss on the road at Kansas State. The Tigers won their 2nd straight home game on Saturday with a 34-17 win over Abilene Christian, catapulted by 2 long first-quarter touchdowns. The Tigers scored on a 78-yard punt return from Luther Burden, as well as a 79-yard touchdown pass from Brady Cook to Dominic Lovett to cruise to victory. Quarterback Brady Cook finished 22 of 31 for 297 yards and 3 touchdowns in the win. Mizzou ran the ball 41 times for 215 yards, with an average of 4.8 yards per carry. 8 different players had rushing attempts in the game. Lovett was the top receiver with 7 catches for 132 yards and 2 touchdowns on the day. Overall, the Tigers had 487 yards of total offense and turned the ball over once. After a 2-0 start against 2 lower-tier teams at home this season, the Auburn Tigers got a whack-up call last Saturday in a 41-12 home loss to Penn State. Auburn was outscored 27-6 in the second half, turning a fairly close game into a blowout loss. Auburn was able to move the ball, gaining 415 total yards, including 296 through the air. Starting quarterback TJ Finley was just 11 of 19 for 152 yards with an interception before being replaced by redshirt freshman Robbie Ashford, who was 10 of 19 for 144 yards with a touchdown and an interception. Reports have surfaced that Finley may have hurt his shoulder and will not dress versus Mizzou. Ashford led the Tigers with 51 yards rushing on the day, while Finley added 47 before leaving the game with an apparent injury. The story of the day for Auburn's defense was the unit's difficulty in the red zone. Penn State went 5 for 5 in the red zone on the day. They also allowed Penn State to convert on 5 of 11 third down chances and gave up a total of 477 yards, including 254 on the ground, to the newly revamped Penn State ground attack. Despite likely being without Finley in this matchup, the line has actually shifted a point and a half in the favor of Auburn. The reason seems to be simple: Auburn likes to run the ball, and Mizzou is awful against the run. In its lone game against a quality opponent, Mizzou coughed up 235 yards on the ground to Kansas State in a blowout loss. With Ashford likely at the helm at quarterback for the entire game, Auburn will certainly look to run early and often, and will have the more nimble of their 2 quarterbacks in the game. The objective for Auburn will be to protect the football, as they are unlikely to cause many turnovers, given their current track record. They will benefit from Missouri's sloppy play and propensity for penalties in this one, as Mizzou has 27 penalties already this season. Missouri has also done much better on the ground, but that plays right into Auburn's strengths on defense. Through the air, Mizzou averages a modest 218 yards per game. In their SEC opener, I look for Auburn to come out fast and run the ball down Mizzou's throat in a double touchdown victory. Lay the points and go with Auburn minus 7.5 points. The Tigers are full of youth around the field, especially on offense, as quarterback Brady Cook is the starting signal caller. Cook is a sophomore show has thrown for 626 yards this season, along with 4 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. He is coming off his best game of the season against ACU, as he threw for 297 yards on 22 completed passes out of 31 attempts. He threw for 3 touchdowns and had 0 interceptions in the game. His top target against ACU was sophomore Dominic Lovett. The sophomore wideout had 132 yards receiving the ball on 7 catches. He had 2 touchdowns in the victory, his first 2 of the season. Lovett has emerged as the top target for Mizzou as he hauled in 16 catches this season for 274 yards. He is averaging 17 yards per reception. 2 defenses that have struggled in big games. Missouri was dominated by Kansas State in their blowout loss in Week 2. Auburn was manhandled by Penn State last week at home. This game could shape up into a shootout as both teams struggled to get to the quarterback. The over is 5-0 in Auburn's last 5 games after losing by double digits at home. For Missouri, the over is 6-0 in their last 6 games after accumulating more than 280 yards passing in their previous game. Our total pick is over 51.5 points.